Hey guys, tonight we're setting off on a journey into one of the worst years in human history. No, not 2020 though, nice guess. We're going all the way back to the year 536. A year so bad that even professional historians, who usually keep things cool and clinical, have dubbed it the worst year to be alive. Picture this. You open your eyes one morning, stretch your arms, and wait, why is it still dark outside? Why does the air feel thick and wrong? And where did the sun go? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see the sleepy little history-loving pockets around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step outside expecting morning. Instead, you're greeted by a heavy gray fog that drapes the world like a damp funeral shroud. The sun, assuming it's even up there, is nothing more than a dim orange smear in the sky. Not just for a day, not even a week. For over a full year, that weak glow is all you get. Imagine living in permanent overcast, like the worst winter ever, but it's happening everywhere. Rome, China, Ireland, India, Ethiopia, the entire northern hemisphere plunged into cold gray gloom. Historians still argue whether it was one volcanic eruption or two that triggered this chaos. Some say Iceland blew its top. Others point to volcanoes in Central America or Indonesia. Whoever it was, they sure knew how to make an entrance. The eruption, or eruptions, spewed so much ash into the atmosphere that it created a massive veil of dust and sulfur. This wasn't just a bad weather week. This was a planetary dimmer switch set to doom. You shuffle through the village and everyone looks wrong, pale, gaunt, quiet. Conversations are whispers. No one knows what's going on. There's no radio to tune into, no Twitter threads blaming Mercury retrograde, just fear. Because when the sun disappears for months and crops don't grow and the seasons go out of sync, people panic. One ancient historian from Constantinople, Procopius, wrote that the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon. Kind of poetic until you realize he wasn't trying to be. That's literally what it looked like. And over in Ireland, monks noted that bread, failed meaning harvests, were bust for multiple years in a row. Meanwhile, in China, the records say yellow dust rained from the sky and snow fell in midsummer. You know things are dire when even Confucian scribes are logging weird weather instead of tea customs. Now let's talk temperatures. You'd think with all that ash in the air, it'd just be gloomy, but nope. It was freezing. Summer temperatures dropped by up to 5 degrees Celsius. That's nearly 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Doesn't sound like much. Try growing barley in that. Spoiler, you can't. In some places it snowed in August. Rivers froze in places where they'd never frozen before. This wasn't just a bad season. It was a climate crash. And no people didn't just throw on an extra cloak and ride it out. They starved, they got sick, they died. One Byzantine chronicler, Michael the Syrian, wrote that the fog lasted for 18 months and caused great suffering. You know, it's bad when even the church guys are getting dramatic. A quirky detail here, tree rings. Scientists today can look at the growth rings in ancient trees and actually see the year 536. The rings are unusually thin, signaling stunted growth. It's like the trees themselves are saying, yep, that year was the worst. Please never again. Add in layers of ash found in Greenland ice cores, and the evidence stacks up faster than firewood before a snowstorm. And of course, you can't separate this eerie darkness from human psychology. You're a medieval farmer already used to superstitions and omens. Now, the sky looks wrong. The crops fail. People die. What conclusion do you draw? Yep, the world's ending. Apocalypse bingo check. Religious leaders everywhere start preaching repentance. Others claim a demon swallowed the sun. You just try not to freeze to death and wonder if your turnips are cursed. And here's the kicker. No one had the context to understand it. No geology textbooks, no volcano alert system. You didn't even know what a volcano was. All you knew was the birds stopped singing, the rivers turned sluggish, and your neighbor's goat just keeled over from cold. Must be divine punishment, right? But here's something else amid all the doom and gloom. There's an eerie sort of unity. All across the hemisphere from Peru to Persia, people are looking at the same dead sky, suffering the same way. It's one of the rare moments in ancient history where humanity collectively flinched, like we all touched a cosmic stove at once. Even scholars today are spooked by it. Medieval historian Michael McCormick straight up called 536 the worst year to be alive. Not 1347 with the Black Death, not 1918 with Spanish flu, not even 2020. No, he picked 536. And honestly, it's hard to argue with him. So now you know why we're starting here. You're in a world darkened by volcanic ash chilled to the bone and wrapped in uncertainty. And you're going to have to find a way to make it through what's coming next. You wake up the next morning, or at least you think it's morning. The air inside your tiny home is cold, the kind of cold that creeps into your bones and sets up camp. Outside, the sky hasn't changed. Still that eerie, washed-out gray. Still no sign of the sun. You light a tallow candle to check the time, but honestly, you could be in the middle of the night or late afternoon. No one really knows anymore. Time's gotten fuzzy and not in the fun, cozy sweater way. When you step outside, the air smells odd, metallic, dry. The usual earthy scent of wet soil and plants is gone. What plants they've all either withered or failed to sprout. Your breath fogs in the air, even though it's supposed to be spring. People around you look up every now and then, staring into the sky like it owes them an apology. One old woman mutters a prayer. A man crosses himself and mutters something about the sun being eaten by spirits. And here's the unsettling part. That thick veil overhead isn't just blotting out light. It's also warping your sense of reality. Shadows are gone. The birds silent. There are no clear dawns or dusks, just a weird, never-ending dusk that bleeds into duskier dusk. Night falls, but it feels like it never really left. You lie awake longer than you should, because your brain doesn't get the memo that it's bedtime. Circadian rhythms. Broken. Ancient writers noticed it too. Cassiodorus, a Roman administrator, wrote about how the sun was dark and its darkness lasted for 18 months. The stars, he said, appeared at noon. Imagine trying to plant anything when your sun looks like a faint, dirty coin floating behind a foggy window. There's no heat, no brightness, no vitamin D, just permanent twilight and the gnawing sense that the world is off its axis. Historians still debate whether people in 536 thought the sun was literally dying. And really, who could blame them if they did? There's a moment where even the rational ones start to lose faith. After all, it wasn't just the sky. It was the effect on everything else. Your livestock are agitated, restless. The goats aren't breeding right, and the hens barely lay eggs. The rhythm of nature is gone, and without it, people lose their anchor. And then there's the psychological toll. You might think today's seasonal depression is bad, but try it medieval style, no artificial lights, no cozy therapy sessions, no vitamin gummies. Just endless gray and creeping despair. You see it in your neighbor's eyes. You hear it in the silence at mealtime. Even the local priest looks shaken during Mass. The sense that God has turned his face away is thick in the air. One odd little detail that pops up in ancient texts, halos around the sun. These eerie rings, likely caused by ice crystals or volcanic dust, made the sun look like it was glowing unnaturally. Some saw it as divine warning, others witchcraft. You just want your vegetables to grow and your toes to stop going numb in the morning. By now, even animals are reacting. Dogs bark more often, seemingly at nothing. Wolves creep closer to villages hungry and emboldened. Mice chew through grain stores, desperate for anything to eat. Famine hasn't fully arrived yet, but it's knocking, and everyone hears it. In India, records mention a strange yellow fog hanging in the air, making it hard to breathe and casting a sickly tint on everything. In Japan, too, they recorded a mysterious darkness and unseasonal cold. The reach of this thing is massive, far beyond what anyone at the time could have guessed. And the worst part, no one can escape it. Rich, poor, noble peasant, everyone's sun is broken. And now you start hearing rumors, stories carried by merchants or monks from far-off lands, tales of people starving, of entire villages fleeing into the woods, of fields cursed by spirits. There's no Twitter, no radio, but word spreads like frost, slow cold and full of dread. And if you lived back then, you'd have no clue what caused it. Today, we know it was likely a massive volcanic eruption or several. But in 536, you're left grasping at guesses. Was it punishment for sin? A dragon swallowing the sun? Did someone anger the gods? There's no clear answer, just the dark sky, the dying crops, and deepening fear that maybe, just maybe, this is how the world ends. Of course, not everyone reacts with fear. Some lean into it. Apocalyptic sects start popping up. Charismatic leaders claim to know the cause, and more importantly, how to fix it. You watch as friends start fasting, praying, giving away their meager possessions. One man refuses to light any fires, believing the darkness is holy. Another moves into a cave to await divine judgment. There's a general sense of unraveling, like the social threads that held things together are starting to fray. And yet, even in this surreal twilight world, life stumbles forward. You still have to fetch water, still need to gather firewood, still have to milk the cow if she'll let you. But now, you do it all under that dim, wrong-colored sky, squinting into the gloom, and wondering when or if the sun will ever come back. The first thing you notice is the silence. Not the peaceful birds chirping kind. This silence is heavy. It hangs over the fields, where nothing grows, presses into the still air around empty gardens, and fills your stomach like a stone. You walk to the edge of your plot, glance at your soil, and sigh. Nothing. Again. It's been weeks since the last edible sprout dared push its head above ground. The few that did were pale, stunted, confused by the lack of sunlight and warmth. You tried planting early, then late, then not at all, just standing over the dirt and muttering encouragements. Didn't help. It's not just you. Everyone's crops are failing. Barley, wheat, rye, all curled and wilted like they decided to give up. Which is ironic because that's exactly how everyone feels right now. Historians still argue whether this was the first real agricultural collapse of the post-Roman world, but you don't need scholarly consensus when your food supply is literally rotting in the ground. You know something is deeply cosmically wrong. Summer used to mean golden fields and sweaty backs. Now it means cold winds and clouds that don't bring rain, just gloom. You walk past a neighbor trying to turn compost in his patch. He stops when he sees you, shrugs, and points at a single drooping cabbage like it's the last unicorn. You both laugh a little. What else is there to do? Then you go home and divide the remaining beans in your pantry into painfully small piles. One for today, one for tomorrow, one, hopefully, for next week. There's a strange psychology to famine. At first, it's just discomfort. You miss your favorite meals, sure, but there's still food. You joke about smaller waistlines, but slowly, the laughter fades. Your stomach starts to shrink. You chew slower to trick your brain. You wake up thinking about food and go to bed dreaming of bread. And remember, this isn't the modern world. No grocery stores. No backup rice in the cupboard. No government aid. If your crops don't grow, you don't eat. That's it. The end. Back in Constantinople, reports start coming in from rural provinces. Entire farms abandoned, herds of cattle dead from cold and hunger. The emperor's granaries are emptying fast. Even the nobles start to notice their dinner tables aren't quite as lavish, the wine's a little thinner, the feasts less frequent. And in Ireland, monks record a haunting litany failure of bread from the years 536 to 539. That's 3 years of crop failure in a row. You can almost hear the scribes pausing between lines to swallow their own fear. Ireland, usually known for damp but fertile land, is suddenly producing little more than panic. Even in far-off China, the records show weird frost in August and snow in July. The emperor's court scrambles to make sense of it. Rituals are held, altars are built, scholars write reports full of flowery metaphors, but the rice won't grow, not in those conditions. Meanwhile, you try to preserve what little you've got. You dry weeds, chew on boiled bark, mix acorns into your flour to stretch it further. Problem is, acorns have to be soaked and rinsed repeatedly to remove the bitter toxins. Miss a step, and congratulations, you've just given your family a mild case of poisoning. And still, it's better than eating nothing. That weird soup your neighbor made yesterday, it wasn't delicious. It was desperation in a bowl. Dandelion roots, leftover onion, peels of pigeon feather that snuck in by accident. He said it added texture. You pretended to agree. Food becomes currency. A single egg is worth days of labor. A handful of grain is hoarded like gold. People start hiding their stores, even from friends, especially from friends. And every now and then, someone disappears. You hear whispers. They went to the forest to forage. They went to the river to fish. But deep down, you know what really happened. The hunger got them. And you're not just battling nature. You're battling other people. Theft becomes common. Grain bins are raided. Small fences around gardens suddenly have sharp stakes. Even inside villages, trust starts to crack. It's survival mode, and it's not pretty. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some places, people reportedly ate clay. Yep, actual dirt. It was believed to fill the belly and ease the hunger pangs. Spoiler, it didn't work. But it says a lot about what people were willing to try when their bodies screamed for calories. Meat. Forget it. Livestock were either eaten early on or died from the cold. Any surviving animals are guarded like royal heirs. If you hear a chicken clucking somewhere, you're listening to the sound of luxury. Milk. Maybe a few drops if the goats haven't frozen their udders off. Children suffer worst. Their bodies are small, still growing, not built for deprivation. They cry at night, not just from hunger, but from confusion. Why can't we eat mama? And you don't have an answer. So you give them water and stroke their hair and hope they sleep through the worst of it.
As we discussed,
Historians believe that in some areas the population declined by up to 50%. That's not from war. That's just from hunger and cold. Silent killers. Slow, unrelenting. And yet you persist. You barter. You tighten belts. You find wild herbs and edible roots. You learn tricks your grandmother used to talk about, like using old flour and ash to make a passable biscuit. You learn how long you can go without a full meal. You learn that hunger has levels. It's not one feeling. It's a symphony of aches, foggy thoughts, bad dreams, and fatigue. And somehow, your village endures. Some don't make it, but some do. Because humans are maddeningly stubborn. And because even in the worst year imaginable, even when the world seems to be dying, you're still here, still trying. By now, you've forgotten what a full belly feels like. Hunger is your constant companion, a gnawing, invisible creature that settles in your gut and refuses to leave. But it's not just about being hungry anymore. It's about what happens when entire communities run out of food. When you walk into the village square and hear not laughter or trade, but silence. A cold, brittle silence that sounds too much like fear. Today, the baker didn't open his shutters. You know why. There's no more flour. The last loaf went to the Reeves family 2 days ago in exchange for a single chicken. And no one's seen that chicken since. Someone tried to grind dried beans into flour, but it turned into paste, then mold. Others are chewing bark, literally, stripping trees of anything remotely fibrous and boiling it into broth. Does it taste like soup? No. It tastes like bark. But if you're lucky, it fills your stomach just enough to quiet the dizziness. The famine has moved past uncomfortable and into desperate. A peasant girl was caught stealing turnips from the Lord's field. They say she was whipped and tied to the stocks. But you wonder, did she even get to eat one first? You hope so. It's a grim thought, but that's where your mind lives now. Historians still argue whether the famine of the late 530s was the worst since the fall of Rome. But let's be honest, if you're living it, rankings don't matter. All you know is that people are dying. First, the weak, the sick, the elderly, then the young, then people who looked perfectly fine yesterday. You stop trusting your own body. A little chill might be the start of something. A skipped meal might be the one that finally tips you over the edge. Some towns try to ration food officially. There are tokens ledgers, meetings under flickering torchlight. It feels noble at first, everyone working together. But eventually, someone breaks. Someone hides a sack of oats. Someone barters for salted fish behind the chapel. Then another, someone finds out and demands a share. Fists fly. Knives come out. Trust dissolves like stale breadcrumbs in water. And if you think it can't get worse, here comes the rot. With no proper food preservation, what little stores remain begin to spoil. Grain goes moldy. Meat, if you had any, turns sour. Root vegetables shrivel and blacken in the cold. Rats get braver. They dart through storage rooms, gnawing at sacks and leaving behind droppings. You slap one with a broom, and it just hisses like it owns the place. You consider catching it for dinner. But you're not quite there yet. You start noticing people shrinking. Not literally, but their clothes hang looser, their cheeks hollow out. Children's heads look too big for their bodies. You see people stop mid-step to lean on a wall. Eyes, glassy. And always there's coughing. Low, dry, persistent. A warning bell with no clapper. And then you hear about the cities. Constantinople is in crisis. Alexandria, Damascus, Antioch, they're all reporting shortages. Monasteries are overwhelmed. Even merchants are struggling. Trade routes are empty. Nobody's selling grain because nobody has it. The famine isn't a local tragedy anymore. It's a continental one, maybe global. But you don't have maps. You just have rumors. In some places, people begin eating clay mixed with flour. In others, shoe leather. In truly desperate corners, whispers begin to stir. Whispers about people who went missing. About a pot someone saw boiling that didn't smell like any animal. You pretend not to hear. But deep down, you wonder if your child were starving, what would you do? Let's back away from that thought. A quirky historical note here in parts of Scandinavia, archaeologists found evidence of grain caches deliberately hidden during this period, buried in clay pots sealed under rock. Signs that some people at least were trying to plan for the worst. Whether they lived long enough to dig them up again, that part's murky. You hear more prayers these days, more confessions. Even the toughest farmers start visiting the chapel again, not out of faith, out of fear. The priest holds more power now, even as his own robes hang looser than usual. Every Sunday, he stands up and tries to reassure you. This is a test, he says. The righteous will be rewarded. You nod, but your stomach growls too loudly to care about righteousness. You try gardening inside your home. Put a few seeds in clay pots, leave them near the fire, hope they sprout. They don't. There's just not enough light, or warmth, or hope. One morning, you find your neighbor's door ajar. He hasn't been seen in days. You peek in and find nothing but a cold hearth and a half-eaten piece of wood. You leave quietly. What else is there to do? And yet life stumbles forward. Because it has to. You wake up each day and check your stores. You chew slowly. You drink extra water to feel full. You try not to cry when someone offers you a spoonful of soup that tastes like boiled weeds. It's not generosity. It's survival math. If they share now, maybe you'll share later. Maybe. And in all this, you still find tiny moments of humanity. A mother shares her crust of bread with a stranger. A child gives a wilted onion to an old man. Someone hums a song you haven't heard since childhood. You sit in the dark and whisper old stories just to remind yourself that people are still people even in the worst of times. And somehow, you make it through another day. Just when you think things can't possibly get worse, when the crops have failed, the sky refuses to brighten, and famine grips your entire village, something new arrives. Not a miracle, not relief, but a ship. And on that ship, death in the form of tiny stowaways with a taste for blood. Rats, fleas, disease. Welcome to the next act. In this slow-burning apocalypse, the plague of Justinian. You don't know the word bacteria. You've never heard of Yersinia pestis. But you know what sickness looks like, and this one is different. It starts with a few people in the harbor town getting fevers. Then black lumps swell in their necks, armpits, and groins. Then screaming, lots of screaming. You hear the word curse passed around like a prayer. In reality, what's happening is a full-blown bubonic plague. It's the first pandemic of its kind in recorded history, and you lucky, you are living right in the middle of it. Most historians agree it began in 541 CE, just a few years after the volcanic veil first dimmed the world. But remember, people and goods still moved, especially along the Mediterranean. Ships carrying grain from Egypt also carried infected fleas. And the fleas, they did what fleas do. They jumped, they bit, and they infected. Soon, Constantinople is overrun. Emperor Justinian himself catches it and nearly dies. Bodies pile up so fast that entire neighborhoods become impromptu cemeteries. Grave diggers refuse to work. Priests lose count of the dead. Justinian orders mass burials in huge pits where the corpses are layered like firewood. Historians still argue about how many died. Some say tens of millions over several waves. Others think it's less, but even the most conservative numbers are chilling. By the end of it, maybe a third to half of the Eastern Roman Empire's population is gone. But you don't need math to understand it. You just need to walk down your street. The plague reaches your town slower, carried by merchants or returning travelers. Maybe even a priest from a distant monastery. One day, someone in your village coughs. Then they collapse. A few days later, another. Then 5. You start hearing more bells than usual, one for every soul lost. The symptoms are terrifying. People swell with pus-filled buboes the size of apples. Their skin darkens. Some babble nonsense. Others scream until they go silent. The lucky ones die fast. The unlucky ones linger, leaking and hallucinating. You try herbs, prayers, potions made from garlic and vinegar. Some burn incense to cleanse the air. Others light fires in the streets, believing smoke will drive the sickness away. None of it works. One scholar in Constantinople described bodies left in the open, in houses on the road, even inside wells. Imagine needing a drink and realizing your water source is now a grave. And amidst it all, the emperor continues to tax the dead. No, really. Justinian refuses to halt tax collection, even when half the taxpayers are rotting in carts. His dream was to restore Rome's former glory. But now his empire is crumbling under ash, famine, and plague. But let's get personal again. You've survived the dark sky. You've rationed food until you forgot what hunger-free felt like. And now, you're trying not to breathe near anyone. You clutch a bundle of herbs to your face because someone said it might help. You sleep further from your family just in case. You bury your neighbors and wash your hands with stale wine. Anything to stay clean. Anything to stay alive. Some villagers flee to the forests, hoping to escape the infection. But the plague follows. It always follows. Rats don't care about geography. Fleas don't honor social distancing. And medicine, if you can call it that, is mostly guesswork and superstition. You hear one man suggest draining the buboes with a knife. Another says you should smear dung on them. You pass. Even the church is unsure how to spin this. Some priests call it divine punishment. Others say it's a test of faith. Some just stop showing up. In the monastery nearby, monks begin chanting day and night. They won't open their doors to anyone, not out of fear, but because half of them are already dead. But here's the cruelest part. The plague doesn't care who you are, rich or poor, young or old, righteous or sinner. If the flea bites, that's it. You've got a few days, maybe less. Still, you keep going. You boil your drinking water, even though it tastes like ash. You bury the dead with scraps of cloth. You say quiet prayers when no one's listening. You whisper to your children at night, telling them it's going to be okay, even though you're not sure anymore. A strange quiet takes over. The village no longer bustles. There are fewer dogs barking, fewer footsteps. The air feels heavy with the absence of life. And yet, even in the bleakest moments, something strange happens. You adapt. You learn to recognize the early signs. You burn the belongings of the infected. You stop shaking hands. You leave food outside doors instead of delivering it inside. These are proto-quarantine measures, even if you don't have a name for them. And eventually, miraculously, the wave passes. The fevered stop collapsing. The air begins to clear. There are more birds again, more babies crying, more signs that life somehow still insists on returning. But now your village is smaller. Your heart is heavier. And the sky above you still refuses to fully brighten. You've survived the hunger. And now you've survived the plague. But what comes next? You might have thought that emperors and kings would be spared the worst of it. That behind marble walls and gold-threaded curtains, the great would feast and laugh and shrug off the misery outside. But in the year 536, and the grim years that followed, even the highest thrones trembled. In the Byzantine Empire, Emperor Justinian III sits on one of the most powerful seats in the world, or at least he used to. His grand dream was to rebuild the Roman Empire to stitch the glory of Caesar back together with faith law and a frightening amount of tax collection. He had generals, he had ambition, he had Constantinople. And then, everything went sideways. First came the darkness. The skies dimmed, the harvest failed, and whispers of doom crept into the palace halls. Then came the plague sweeping through the empire like a sickle through grain. Even Justinian himself wasn't spared. One day he's giving orders. The next, he's in bed with a fever so high the court starts preparing succession plans. Spoiler, he survives. Barely. But the damage is already done. You're not in Constantinople, of course, but the ripples reach you anyway. You hear tales from wandering monks and passing traders. The great emperor reduced to a sweating, shaking shadow of himself. His officials dead or fleeing. The streets of the mighty capital filled with corpses, the air thick with incense and despair. Historians still debate whether Justinian's reign ever truly recovered. He pushed on issuing laws, building the Hagia Sophia, dreaming of conquest. But his empire was bleeding. The armies were starving. The economy cracked like thin ice under too many feet. His once glorious reconquest campaigns in Italy stalled out. His treasury drained not just by war, but by plague burials and famine relief. And you live in his world, even if you never see his face. The roads aren't safe. The tax collectors still come, but there's nothing left to take. The coins have his name on them, but they buy less and less. And the roads that once buzzed with merchants and pilgrims are now eerily quiet. Meanwhile, law and order fray like an old tunic. Local warlords rise. Some lords abandon their manners. The empire's grip loosens especially in the rural fringes where you live. You once paid a small tribute to the empire and in return got protection. Now you pay more and get nothing except the occasional passing soldier who helps himself to your stew. Even the church starts shifting. Bishops take on roles that once belonged to governors. The local abbot mediates land disputes. Monasteries become sanctuaries, food banks, schools. The state is too busy burning to keep its promises, so faith fills the void, sometimes with hope, sometimes with fear. Let's talk about your world for a moment. You don't really care whether Justinian conquers Italy. You care whether your fence holds against wolves, whether your child's cough is just a cough, whether your two remaining chickens survive the winter. But you feel the decay of power like a slow rot. Less law, more bandits, less structure, more suspicion. A quirky little fact: Justinian's own laws from earlier in his reign, those majestic Latin-heavy codes meant to organize and uplift the empire, end up being used to justify more taxes during the famine. Because apparently, even during the apocalypse, someone's got to fund the bureaucracy. You'd laugh if you weren't so tired. You hear rumors that the emperor, now recovered from his plague, believes God spared him for a reason. He doubles down on church building, writes religious doctrines, and starts seeing himself less as a ruler and more as a divine instrument. Which, to be honest, feels a bit much considering people are still chewing bark to survive. But it's not just Byzantium that's buckling. Other kingdoms begin to feel the strain too. The Western world, already fragile after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, is thrown into deeper chaos. Trade between cities slows to a crawl. Coinage vanishes from some regions entirely. You start bartering again. Goat cheese for wool, a dented pot for dried herbs. It feels older than the empire itself, like civilization is rewinding. Scholars today argue about whether this moment truly marks the start of the so-called Dark Ages. But for you, it's not a debate. It's your daily reality. Roads that once connected towns now crumble. Teachers stop teaching. Builders stop building. People stop dreaming. And still, the empire staggers forward. Justinian doesn't give up. He rebuilds some cities. He sends generals into battle. He holds on to power for nearly 40 years, which, considering everything, is frankly miraculous. But his world has shrunk. His dreams cost too much. The population is a shadow of what it was. The empire is a skeleton in gilded armor, still impressive, but brittle. One night around your village fire, someone tells a story about how the emperor made a new law just last month. You raise an eyebrow. What law? The one about grain shipments, they say. You laugh. Grain. What grain? And you all chuckle in that hollow, ironic way people do when there's nothing left but humor. The empire was supposed to protect you. It was supposed to be strong, eternal. But now it feels like a distant story, a tale of marble halls and fancy robes, while the real world freezes and starves. And yet, you still feel its echoes, the weight of its legacy, the absurdity of its tax system, the strange pride when someone mentions that you are technically a Roman citizen, despite living in a half-rotted hut next to a goat who thinks she owns the place. So yes, Justinian's dream is faltering. The plague has ravaged his people. The darkness still clouds the sky, but somehow, the machine of empire lurches onward, wheels squeaking gears, grinding powered by inertia, and the desperate belief that something, anything, can still be saved. The news arrives slowly, like everything does these days. A trader passing through your village mentions that a kingdom in the west has collapsed. Again, you've never heard of it. Probably couldn't point to it on a map, even if you had one. But the tone in his voice tells you it matters. Europe isn't just suffering, it's unraveling. The Western Roman Empire had already fallen by this point. splintering into fragments and warlord states. But in the wake of 536 and the disasters that follow, even those fragments start to decay. Roads vanish under weeds, towns empty out, whole regions go quiet, like someone just pressed mute on an entire continent. You don't hear the term Dark Ages, of course. That'll come centuries later, coined by scholars who never had to scrape mold off barley bread or trade a worn-out boot for a spoonful of grain. But you feel it every day, in the stillness, in the isolation, in the way letters stop arriving because no one's writing them anymore. And it's not just you. Across what used to be the Roman West, libraries are abandoned, workshops close, trade routes dry up, literacy plummets, monasteries become the only places left where people can read, write, or even remember what came before. You might not know Latin, but you know silence, and you can feel it spreading. Historians still debate whether this collapse was inevitable, or if 536 simply lit the match on a pile of dry kindling. Either way, the effect is the same. Imagine a quilt that's been carefully stitched together over centuries, roads, laws, towns, customs, and now imagine someone yanking out thread after thread. The quilt frays, then falls apart. In your village, the signs are subtle but unmistakable. The tanner moved away last spring. No one knows where. The carpenter stopped taking commissions. He's too busy trying to grow beans in soil that just won't cooperate. The smith sharpens what few tools are left, but hasn't made anything new in months. Why bother? No one can pay him anyway. You remember when traveling performers came through once a year. A juggler, a puppet show, music. You haven't seen them in what feels like forever. Entertainment now is a warm fire, a good story, and the miracle of not coughing yourself into the grave. Markets that once brought people together from across counties are smaller, quieter. No saffron, no dates, no fine cloth from the east. Just potatoes, onions when there are any, and worn faces bartering spoons for soup bones. One trader offers a single wool cloak for 3 chickens. Everyone laughs. He doesn't. Even religion feels different. The churches still hold service, but the sermons are darker now. More fire and brimstone. Less celebration, more endurance. You get the sense the priests are scared too, though they try not to show it. One openly wonders if this is the punishment foretold in Revelation. The sky is wrong, he says. The ground is cursed. You nod, but only because it's easier than arguing. And then there's the weird part. Time feels broken. Days blur. Seasons blend. You try to keep track by carving notches into the doorpost. But what's the point? There's no school, no festivals, no royal birthdays. Just cold hunger and a gnawing sense that the world used to be more vibrant, alive. Back when the Romans ruled, people could travel from Spain to Syria on a single network of roads. Now you're not even sure if the next village still exists. Maybe it was swallowed by the forest. Maybe bandits took over. Maybe it's just empty. And that forest, it's creeping closer. You swear the tree line wasn't that near last year. Buildings crumble. Roofs collapse. No one has time to maintain them. Nature doesn't wait. Trees root in old stone. Vines claw their way over temples. Civilization is retreating one step at a time. A quirky historical tidbit, some villages even forgot they were part of a kingdom. They just operated on their own, electing local elders, solving problems internally. Feudalism hadn't fully taken shape yet, but this strange in-between world was laying its foundations. You don't serve a king, you serve the guy with the biggest barn and the sharpest axe. Cultural memory gets fuzzy. People forget Roman engineering. Aqueducts break, and no one knows how to fix them. Roads buckle and go unused. The knowledge isn't destroyed, it's just ignored. Stored in monasteries locked behind Latin, waiting for someone curious enough to rediscover it centuries later. And yet you still wake up each day, still try to coax life from the soil, still barter and beg and band together with neighbors. Because collapse doesn't look like explosions or armies. It looks like apathy, like the slow fading of memory, like people saying, that's just how things are now, until one day they can't even remember what it was like before. Sometimes around the fire, an old man talks about the way things used to be. Heated baths, white stone buildings, candles that didn't smoke. You ask him how he knows, and he says, "My father told me." You nod. It sounds like a fairy tale, but you believe him. Because somewhere deep inside, you feel it too. That haunting sense that once the world was bright and busy and brilliant. And now, it's just surviving. Barely. Your breath fogs in the morning air, even though it's supposed to be midsummer. The chickens aren't laying. The well tastes metallic. But today's unease doesn't come from the sky, or the ground it rides in, with the next traveler a merchant from far, far east. His robes are tattered, his feet cracked and swollen, but his eyes tell the story before his words do. China has fallen into chaos. You sit with him by the fire, sharing weak broth and listening. He speaks of storms in the south, of snow in the wrong seasons, of rice paddies left dry and abandoned. The Sui dynasty hasn't risen yet. The Liang is fading. In between famine, rebellion. The same story you've been living told in a different tongue across a different continent. Even in your own broken corner of the world, it's jarring to think of the mighty empires of the East suffering the same way. But that's the thing about the year 536, and the dark veil it cast over the planet. It didn't play favorites. China, with its grand capitals and ancient scholars, faced the same cold, the same crop failures, the same confusion. Historians still argue whether the Chinese records from this period describe the exact same atmospheric events as the ones noted in Europe and the Middle East. But the parallels are eerie. In the Book of Sui, there's mention of a yellow dust clouding the sky, crops failing, people dying, a royal court in disarray, unsure how to explain nature's betrayal. One Chinese astronomer writes of the sun losing its brilliance. Another scroll describes floods in one region, drought in the next. Rice harvests down. Wheat harvests missing entirely. And in an empire where good governance was supposed to harmonize heaven and earth, this meant the emperor had failed. You stir the soup slowly and imagine across the mountains and deserts a farmer in the Yangtze Valley doing the same thing, boiling tree bark, chewing sour leaves, rationing rice grain by grain. You've never met him. You never will. But his story rhymes with yours. And then there's the superstition. China, like every culture of the time, sees signs in the sky. Eclipses, comets, strange fog. These aren't just weather. They're omens. A bad harvest isn't just bad luck. It's heaven's way of sending a memo. And heaven, apparently furious. You're not sure whether to be comforted or horrified by this global synchronicity. On the one hand, you're not alone. On the other hand, you're really not alone. Everyone is falling apart together. The merchant speaks of uprisings, peasants rebelling against governors, bandits seizing grain stores. Not so different from the rumors you've heard about Gaul or Iberia. Desperation doesn't wear national colors. It wears empty bellies and cold skin. A quirky tidbit. During this period, some Chinese communities reportedly turned to geomancy, trying to balance their villages by rearranging furniture, painting walls red, or realigning gates. If the sky was angry, maybe the earth could help soothe it. You glance around your own cottage and wonder if moving your chair might help. Worth a shot. And it's not just famine. The merchant talks about illnesses. Too strange. Fevers people, dropping where they stand. Temples filling with incense smoke and coughing. Maybe not the same plague that hit Constantinople, but something. A sickness that creeps quiet and cruel. Trade slows. Silk caravans vanish. Ceramics stop arriving. Tea becomes a story instead of a commodity. And all this before the Sui unify the realm again. Before the Tang bring poetry and splendor. Right now, it's just the gap between dynasties, the hollow space between empires, and it's full of ghosts. You ask the merchant if there's any place that's thriving. Any corner of the world spared, he thinks. Then shakes his head. No, not that he's seen. The dark sky has turned the entire northern hemisphere into a patchwork of suffering. And even if you don't know the science behind it, no one does. It's hard to shake the feeling that the earth itself has tilted, gone askew. You thank the merchant, give him a dry heel of bread, and wish him luck on the road ahead. He nods and continues westward. And you sit for a long time staring into the fire, realizing that even in the farthest lands, you've only ever heard whispers about the same gray hangs overhead. The same fear settles in chests. The same hunger gnaws at bones. And yet people go on. Across Asia, as in Europe, as in Africa, people still get up. Still try to harvest what little they can. Still tell stories to their children. Still squint into the sky, wondering when, if ever, the sun will come back. Another traveler arrives, but this one's wearing a thick sand-blasted cloak and speaks with the flowing cadence of Persia. He brings more bad news, not that you were expecting anything cheerful. From the east, once more, a different empire is coming undone. The Sassanid Persians, guardians of Zoroastrian fire temples, and the mighty cities of Ctesiphon and Nishapur are staggering under the same weight that's been crushing you. The Sassanid Empire, proud rival to Byzantium, isn't doing much better. The darkness, the cold, the ruined harvests, they didn't skip Iran. If anything, they hit it just as hard. According to the traveler, the sun vanished from Persian skies the same way it vanished from yours. The royal fires, symbolic of divine favor, began to burn less brightly. A few were even extinguished. You don't need to know their theology to understand what that meant. In a faith built on balanced light versus dark good versus evil, having your sacred fire go dim is not just a bad omen, it's a catastrophe. You sip thin tea, as he tells it. Noble families hoarded food. Soldiers deserted their posts. Bandits flourished in mountain passes. Zoroastrian priests debated what this darkness meant. Some said it was Ahriman, the spirit of destruction, finally gaining ground. Others claimed a celestial misalignment, a divine punishment, a warning. Historians still argue whether the empire's troubles during this period were directly caused by environmental collapse or if they simply amplified pre-existing problems. But what's not up for debate is this the Sassanids suffered. Their economy, once vibrant with silk, silver, and spices, slowed to a crawl. Their border regions, especially in Armenia and Central Asia, became harder to manage. Communication broke down. Local lords got bold. And much like you, Persian villagers turned inward. Trade halted. Travel became dangerous. People who once relied on caravan routes now lived off whatever they could scavenge from increasingly barren land. Sound familiar? A quirky footnote here in Sassanid cosmology: eclipses and planetary misbehavior were tied to chaos and corruption in the world. Astrologers scrambled to explain the skies pouring over charts, while the people below starved and froze. One court advisor reportedly suggested sacrificing livestock to placate the heavens. But by then, there weren't many animals left to offer. Back in your part of the world, you wonder if the same gods are speaking through every cloud.